Say anything to stop us from shutting her down.
5 hours ago, Red Queen went
I
on site,
implore you,
sealed the hive, and killed everyone down.
Implore away.
please.
How is she still standing?
Bitch isn't standing now.
You're all going to die down here.
I absolutely loved video games growing up. It was such a fun pastime that sparked imagination and went hand in hand with my love for movies. My brother and I were very competitive, and we could play video games for hours on end. I remember playing Resident Evil 2 on the Nintendo 64 and was absolutely amazed by the graphics, the scare factor, the gameplay, but also the story. Being a lifelong zombie fan, thanks to growing up on George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, the idea of a game that allowed me to be in that world couldn't have been more exciting. As far as film goes, it had been a little while since I got into a zombie film. I always thought to myself that Resident Evil would make a great zombie movie. Enter director Paul W.S. Anderson, tasked with bringing a popular zombie video game to the big screen. The question is, would fans accept his vision of the Resident Evil world, or would they lash out like the Red Queen when it sealed the Hive and killed all of the people inside of it?
Let's get down to brass tacks.
In this Why You Hate video, by the way, I've done several episodes of films that sometimes divides the fans and causes a great discussion for people on both sides of the fence. Check them out in the Why You Hate playlist if you haven't already, or if you're in need of some fun and a good horror discussion, check them out again. It's not going to hurt, I promise. So as I was saying, I'm going to go over some reasons why some fans have issues with Resident Evil, including multiple things that I know will be a strong debate in this community for the lovers of this film and the detractors of it. I will also attempt, if at all possible, to show how some issues might not hold as much weight as they seem. Also, I'll touch upon some history and behind-the-scenes info to give a snapshot of this film's journey. So get ready to climb out of the elevator opening that is too freaking small for any human being on the planet. Wake up in the shower half naked, not knowing why. Face off against a legion of dogs with real issues. Try to stay away from people with severe hangry issues. Here are the reasons why you hate Resident Evil. Number 1. Origins and director. George A. Romero, director of Night of the Living Dead, was originally attached to write and direct, but left the project in 1999 due to creative differences over the script. The project was dormant for over a year before Paul W.S. Anderson signed on to write and direct. Anderson later claimed that he had once locked himself inside of his apartment for 4 weeks while playing the first 3 Resident Evil games back-to-back, and became so obsessed with them that he contacted his producer Jeremy Bolt, telling him that they had to make this series into a movie. According to George A. Romero, the rejection of his script was due to Bernd Eisinger. Everyone else associated with the pre-production apparently liked the script. Many other factors resulted in the script being rejected, such as the creative liberties Romero took with the first game that Capcom feared game fans would not approve of, and the fact that the script would have been way too expensive since it contained every single T-virus mutant in the first game, and trying to include them all would have ballooned the budget. Furthermore, Capcom feared that a faithful adaptation would actually discourage people from buying the games.
And you blew it! You blew it!
If they could just watch the movie, so the ultimate decision was made to make an original story that only contained a handful of references to the games.
Bullshit!
Finally, Romero's script was considered excessively gory, even by Resident Evil standards, so it was rejected as well out of the fear of an NC-17 rating. But going back to Paul W.S. Anderson, In 1995, his low-budget film, Mortal Kombat, became one of the first commercially successful video game adaptations. Issues aside, Mortal Kombat was a fun adaptation that me and my friends enjoyed a lot. And don't forget about that kick-ass soundtrack too. After playing Resident Evil, Anderson saw its cinematic potential and he wrote a script titled Undead, which he described as a, quote, ripoff of the game. The head of Constantine Film was enthusiastic, so Anderson developed it into a script for Resident Evil. And in late 2000, Anderson was announced as the director and the writer, and Resident Evil re-entered pre-production stages. Anderson stated that the film would not include any tie-ins with the video game series, as underperforming movie tie-ins are too common, and Resident Evil of all games deserved a good celluloid representation. Number 2. Cast of characters. Originally, the film was going to have Sarah Michelle Gellar star as Alice. Also, Jennifer Love Hewitt, Kirsten Dunst, and Natasha Henstridge were some of the actresses considered to play Jill Valentine when different scripts were being developed for the film, but it's been said that the big problem a lot of them had with those was the level of violence and the amount of nudity. Gwyneth Paltrow was also offered the role of Alice. Alice was originally scripted as more of a damsel in distress that often had to be rescued by the supporting characters. When Milla Jovovich came aboard, she convinced Paul W.S. Anderson to rewrite the character as more action-oriented. There are fans that enjoyed her turn as an action hero. It gave the film and the franchise a singular focus to latch onto. Some of the set pieces became balanced toward action more than horror naturally. This is also the decision that played well into the video game vibe aspect. You felt like this character of Alice is kicking zombie ass, just like you'd want to be doing when you're playing the video game. The rest of the cast were Michelle Rodriguez, Colin Salmon, Martin Cruz, and James Purfoy. Michelle Rodriguez as Rain stood out and received a fan following. Rodriguez is a natural at action and showed it as the rough and tough commando. Special shout out to Colin Salmon as James One Shade. I mean, his name alone is money. He had a lot of memorable dialogue and scenes, even besides his epic death in the laser room. Milla Jovovich revealed in an interview that she almost quit the film because she was unsatisfied with some significant script changes, all revolving around Michelle Rodriguez's character of Rain. In the original script by Paul W.S. Anderson, she was the one who got killed by zombies when they first attacked the team. Anderson changed that so that JD is the one who dies during the attack. When the cast were doing ADR for the film, Milla Jovovich wasn't happy with her performance. She originally delivered her lines in her own actual speaking voice. She decided to loop her entire dialogue by giving Alice a lower speaking voice. None of the main characters from the Resident Evil video games appear, only the villains. It is revealed that Matt will become the nemesis from the third game. The games do not provide a backstory for the character. And Jason Isaacs has a brief cameo as Dr. William Birkin from the second game. All the sequels had at least one of the game's main characters. Number 3. Audience and reaction. Many fans of the game had mixed feelings about Resident Evil. Did it deliver what they wanted, or was it a disappointment? The debate usually went back and forth. The film brought the zombie aspect, the shady ties of the Umbrella Corporation, the claustrophobia, and kicking ass. But there was no nuance, no real sense of mystery, and also the figuring out of clues to what's going on in this world. If I could have counted how many of my friends liked this movie, I probably could find as many that thought it was a disappointment. And some would say, hey, it's better than Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
It is not in the file. It is not. You son of a bitch!
Well, guess what? That's not too hard to do. Still, in spite of fans being divided, Resident Evil made money at the box office, and you know what that means. With a budget of $33 million, bringing in $103 million, the writing was already on the wall. Its successful opening weekend alone sparked a frenzy among US studios, and they were eager to capitalize on the interest in video games. Titles like Doom, Silent Hill, and Max Payne were all snapped up quickly. It was time for a new wave of video games to be adapted on the big screen, for better or for worse. Maybe the fans who were disappointed got the shaft for what could have been. there were many cuts to the theatrical release of Resident Evil. The original cut of the movie got an NC-17 rating due to graphic violence and nudity, so all of those scenes had to be cut down for the R rating. Paul W.S. Anderson said in interviews after the movie came out how he will release the director's cut with all of the scenes that were cut for rating and ones which were cut for other reasons such as pacing issues, but he never did. There was, however, a VHS work print of the film available in early 2000s with the alternate title Resident Evil Genesis, which was also used during test screenings of the film and which was fully uncut, but it never showed up anywhere again since then. During the COVID-19 lockdown in 2020, James Cameron revealed in an interview with Empire that he had a surprising affection for the widely panned film, stating, quote, "One of my guilty pleasure films that I actually think is quite beautifully made is Resident Evil," he said. "Watching Michelle Rodriguez in that film moving like this feral creature is joyful." Rodriguez worked with Cameron 7 years later on Avatar in 2009. This film is included on the film critic Roger Ebert's most hated list. In his scathing review, which spoiled almost the entire movie, he repeatedly lampooned the fact that objects like doors make slamming noises even when not moved, the lack of scientific logic, and the graceless ways the zombies move in. He said they walk with the lurching shuffle of a drunk trying to skate through Slurpees to the men's room. The only praise he had was for the laser corridor sequence. Number 4. Story and style. The movie plays out with a high-energy style accentuated with the pulse-pounding and sometimes loud score. The film's score and soundtrack were composed by Marco Beltrami and Marilyn Manson during mid-2001. Manson described the score and the soundtrack as being more electronic than his previous work. Paul W.S. Anderson wanted the soundtrack and the score to be reminiscent of the earlier John Carpenter films. The music is married with interesting camera work at times that bring you into the POV of the characters and the situations they willingly marched into. The movie wanted to mimic the game, but ultimately can't do it. It plays it straight up for the action horror angle. The edits can be jarring in multiple scenes as if it will bring more intensity. There's no mystery to how the movie tries to play Milla's character as the Alice in Wonderland. This is another pretty solid example of the filmmakers going for the low-hanging fruit. I mean, her name is Alice, and she's literally going down the rabbit hole facing off against the Red Queen. Another reference to Alice in Wonderland is right in the beginning, which, to be fair, is one of the strongest aspects of the movie. The first on-screen kill by the Red Queen, except for the falling lift where you don't get to see the occupants, is Dr. Black in the lift trying to climb out and is eventually beheaded. Off with her head. The whole opening setup was interesting and shocking, plus it was well shot. The scene where Alice first wakes up naked in the shower was probably left over of a similar scene from one of the scrapped versions of the script, in which Jill Valentine is showering when she gets attacked by a monster and has to run and fight it while she's naked and with no weapons. Supposedly the monster was Chimera from the first game, and it even attempts to sexually assault Jill in the same scene. No wonder why it was cut. Towards the end of the film, Alice is barefoot in all of her scenes, including those where she's walking around on the streets in bare feet. This wasn't difficult for Jovovich, as she spent an entire movie, The $1 Million Hotel, walking around barefoot. But let's just be real about it. Walking around on the streets that is totally obliterated by the zombie apocalypse, she had to have stepped on some glass or something. I mean, this is Paul W.S. Anderson and not you-know-who. As mentioned elsewhere, there's a shot of Alice's eye close up near the end of the film. In this and the next two films in the series, Resident Evil Apocalypse and Resident Evil Extinction, the motif is also repeated at or near the beginning of the films. The films also repeat the image of the opening in this film, in that Alice is shown basically nude immediately after the close-up of her eye. Again, these are direct references to the first game in the series, Resident Evil from 1996, since the close-up eye shot is used for the logo of the game. Number 5. The finale. There's a ton of action happening, and you honestly wonder how Alice and company will survive. Spence's betrayal was not a surprise whatsoever, but the possibility of Rain surviving her bite was. Ultimately, we knew that they would have to face off against the liquor. The special effects for it leave a lot to be desired. Oh, and the antivirus doesn't work on Rain, so you know. Matt gets clawed and injured by the liquor before Alice can kill it. Matt and Alice barely make it out of the hive and back into the mansion, and all of a sudden, a group of Umbrella scientists come in and seizes them. Alice awakens half naked at the Raccoon City Hospital strapped to an examination table. I mean, let's just be real. Milla Jovovich was half naked through most of this movie. It is what it is. She escapes outside, only to find Raccoon City in ruins. She retrieves a shotgun from an abandoned police car for defense, and boom, that's it. A setup for the sequel? That is, if the movie does well enough, which of course we know it did. It was a good finale all in all, to be quite honest, even if it felt a little rushed and bogged down by the shoddy special effects for the liquor. Although she's never had any problems with nudity in her films, Milla Jovovich did ask for the original scripted ending to be changed and cut down the amount of time she was supposed to be nude in the scene. Originally in the script, Alice wakes up in the hospital fully nude and spends more time walking around the hallways and rooms before walking out on the street while she's still nude. Jovovich didn't want to film the part where she's walking nude outside on the streets, which led to some scene changes, including Alice wearing something to cover her up. The part where she finds a shotgun was also added to make the ending at least a little bit more hopeful, since originally she would stand in the middle of the destroyed street, listening to the monsters roaring all around as night is falling. At the end of the day, Resident Evil made the non-video game character of Alice a zombie ass-kicking, sometimes half-naked badass chick, and we as fans must deal with it in our own way.
Back the fuck off!
You have to ask yourself, is Resident Evil a good video game adaptation, or did it betray the love of the fans?
Bullshit!
That is a question only you can answer. As always, this video is not here to make you love Resident Evil or to hate it. It's simply a discussion to highlight the history and aspects of it, good or bad, with you, the viewer. So what do you think? Are you a fan of Resident Evil? If so, tell us why. And if not, let's discuss why you hate Resident Evil. If you haven't hit the like button for more content, please do. If you're not subscribed to the Night Watch Zone, this is the time to do it and become part of this fantastic movie community where you'll never love and talk about movies the same. If you like this video, check out my other Why You Hate videos and other content here, and I'll see you there. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, you are the Night Watch. Peace.